So greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you for this hour. Our goal is, since this has been kind of a prolonged start with COVID kind of stirring things up for us, that we wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page and ready to dive in about 2 weeks with your fellows and really be on the same page about what you're about to embark upon. So Natasha and I have put together a little bit of an overview of the Thriving Earth Exchange program. I think you guys have pretty much all heard this. Would just like to review, discuss what you should be looking forward to in the next few weeks, the next few months, and then open it up for questions and answers. So please interrupt us at any point along the talk. This is really meant to be more of a discussion than us talking at you. You're welcome to use the raise hand function. You're welcome to just unmute yourself. I think we're a small enough group that that should work just fine. One of us will be monitoring the chat at all times if you feel more comfortable that way. So with that.
And just as a reminder, for those of you that have just joined us, if you don't mind renaming yourself in the chat with your name and your community name, that'll help everyone sort of get to know each other. And if possible, please do show your video. It would be great to see everyone's faces. Sorry, Erin, go on.
No, good reminder, thank you. Let me just grab this. So we'd like to start with an icebreaker. So I'm going to ask Natasha to take this screen away so we can all see each other in just a moment. Would like to kind of do a little popcorn of an icebreaker. So in a moment, we're going to be able to see each other. And for example, I'll answer the questions first, and then I'm going to kind of popcorn it, if you will, over to somebody else that I see on the screen. Feel free to pick anybody, preferably somebody who hasn't spoken before, but we are 19 people now. So if you get lost along the way, that's okay. The person who has been popcorned and has already spoken can just pick somebody else. We'd like you to keep the answers short and sweet. This is just a first, let's get to know each other, and then we'll dive into the details of the community science programs you're about to embark upon. So I am going to type those questions into the chat right here. The first one, what is your name and what community do you represent? And what's something unique about your community? What would you like everyone to remember about your community after today? And it can be totally silly. We want people to remember your community. So Tucson, Arizona has cactus, saguaro cactus. And this is always how I introduce it, especially when I'm international, because people are like, yes, I understand that. So my name is Erin Gleason. I am actually in Washington, DC. One of my communities is Tucson, Arizona. That's where I went to college. And definitely Tucson, Arizona and Phoenix, but we don't really like Phoenix too much sometimes. Always, first thing that makes people remember Tucson are the saguaro cactus. So with that, I'd like to popcorn it over to Lisa.
Oh, hi there. I'm Lisa Anich. I am working with the Friends of Pinole Creek Watershed, but since we have 2 people from our team here, I'm going to say something about Contra Costa County, and we have beautiful mountain, Mount Diablo. I live close to Mount Diablo, which has one of the greatest views of our Bay Area. Even at 3,849 feet, it's got a gorgeous view for hundreds of miles. And so I just pick a name.
Yeah.
I call on Jenny.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jenny McAdams with Franklin County, Ohio, Public Health. Quick caveat with my video, I have 3 screens and you're on one and my video is here. So I'm looking at you, but sometimes not. And my community, Ohio, is very flat. We have a lot of corn and soybeans, and in my jurisdiction, we have a famous concrete pillars of corn sculpture. There's 20 of them. It's very exciting. If you're into corn and sculpture, come on down. And I'm going to call on Rebecca.
Well, hi, I'm Rebecca Jim, and I am in Miami, Oklahoma, and I the town is named after a tribe, and not Miami, Florida, but it's named after the Miami tribe, which when the French found them, they thought they were friendly, so they were Miami. So, and it was between a river and a creek, so I would say it would be like this.
And who are you going to popcorn it to, Rebecca?
I'm doing it. Let's see. I would say Eric.
Hi, everybody. Eric Oplerud. I'm with the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions in Northern Virginia. And we're a suburban urban community that is incredibly self-satisfied, including they think that everything that they do is wonderful. So we're trying to prove to them that they've got a little work to do. I don't know who's, I came on late, so I don't know who to call on. So let me try.
You're early, so almost anybody will work.
Okay, how about Dejana? Or Diana?
That's correct. It's Diana. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I'm with the Barren River Area Development District, and there's actually two of us here. Emily is the other one, and we represent a 10-county region. So I guess something to remember about our region would be that we're home to the Mammoth Cave National Park, which is also known as one of the longest cave systems in the world. And I guess I will call on Melissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Goodwin. I'm Thriving Earth Exchange staff. I'm currently based in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which will not be having a Thriving Earth Exchange project right now, unfortunately, but something fun about Gaithersburg is that we have an annual book festival every year. It's been going on for 10 years, and it's a really cool community event with book signings and book sales and things for kids. I look forward to it every spring. I'll popcorn it to Kala.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kala Allison, and we're with the MPA Collaborative Network. There's actually 3 of us on this call, and my community is the whole coast of California. So we cover a pretty big stretch. We have 14 collaboratives that work on locally managing our marine protected areas, and there's 124 marine protected areas along the entire coast. And it's our community. We actually go and travel up and down the entire coast, and we're stationed at different parts of California to work with these groups. And unfortunately, there's a lot of smoke. It's not really a fun fact right now with California, but the ocean's still beautiful, and we're hoping it clears up very, very soon. Oh, I guess I will call on Joseph.
Joseph Gallegos. I'm out of South Central Los Angeles. Our major focus is around the Watts area and that whole urban geographic area. Looking for at solving urban heat island effects. So, who do I call? Norma.
Thank you, Joseph. Hello, everyone. I'm Norma Martinez Rubin. I am in the city of Pinole, which is on the sunny side of the San Francisco Bay Area, in the Bay Area, and the sunny side, the East Bay. Our town is about 19,000 population, borders the San Pablo Bay. And what you're seeing in my background is what has brought Lisa Anick and Friends of Pinole Creek Watershed together for the project through Aaron and staff. And it is the Pinole Creek, which runs through our town for about 10 miles through it and leads into the San Pablo Bay and its residents. So there are a few ducks lying around there. Another thing about Pinole, so that's the anglicized pronunciation, but it is Pinole, which originates from Spanish, and it is it was a gruel type porridge kind of thing that the indigenous communities indigenous to the area would prepare as a meal. And so the name stuck by the Spaniards who eventually came to the area, and here we are. So Pinole or Pinole welcome, come by, and today happens to be a sunny day, thank goodness. And so how about Jamie Twiddley, is it?
It's Tuatele Lewis.
Californians all know you're Californian. It's like 5 in a row now.
Hi, I'm Jamie Tuatele Lewis. I work for the Resource Conservation District in Monterey County. I think people are familiar with Monterey County. We're sort of a bubble within a bubble, and we have the famous aquarium, and we have the lettuce curtain. So those are some things that people might know or might not know. And yeah, I'm here to work on some fire-related things, and I think I'm going to pass it to Adrian.
Hey, I'm Adrian Nuzunian. I'm at San Juan Basin Public Health in Southwest Colorado. I think we're representing 5 counties, including 2 tribes of Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Ute. Something unique, 4 hours from the closest city, like Albuquerque. I guess before COVID, I've heard that we have more restaurants per capita than San Francisco. Don't know how true that is. I think Emily, this is really testing my memory.
Hello, I'm Emily. I'm with the Barren River Area Development District in South Central Kentucky. We are a 10-county region, and as Diana mentioned earlier, we're home to the largest cave system, known cave system. But also, if you were to purchase a Corvette, it would come from Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is where our office is based out of. So I'm going to call on Kelly.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly McCarthy. I work with Aaron and the other Thriving Earth Exchange staff on the line here. I'm based in and from a town called Shamokin, Pennsylvania. And we are in the coal region of Northeast Pennsylvania. And one unique fact is that really close to our area, the coal region, there's a town called Centralia, which has become kind of an attraction because there's been a mine fire burning underneath it since 1962. So that is kind of an unfortunate claim to fame, but I'm going to call on, oh my goodness, also my memory being tested. Did we hear from Lauren yet?
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. I'm in like Tulsa, Oklahoma, but the community I'm representing along with 3 other people is Southeast Oklahoma in Antlers. And something unique about our community is that the river that flows through there is considered to be one of the most ecologically diverse rivers and the most freshwater source in the state of Oklahoma. So that's kind of cool. I guess Colin, has Aubrey gone yet?
I have not, but I am with Kala and Nicole. So I'll just add that for our 14 collaboratives, they each have their own unique personality. I am based in the Santa Barbara Channel region, and our Channel Islands have also quite a bit of diversity. So if you haven't heard of them, I encourage you to check them out or come visit. And I will popcorn to Nicole just for cohesiveness so that we can stay within or finish up all the collaborative network representatives here.
Yes, hi everyone. Nicole Palma, also representing those MPA stakeholder groups along the coast of California. Something unique about our community, this kind of relates to our project, but we do an annual statewide coastal BioBlitz called Snapshot Cal Coast. That focuses on the intertidal areas inside and outside of MPAs and uses iNaturalist to collect observations of biodiversity. And I will throw it to Raj. Have you gone yet?
Haven't. Hi, my name's Raj Pandya. I also work in Thriving Earth Exchange with Aaron and Natasha and Kelly and Melissa. I grew up in a town called Rockford, Illinois, also known as the Forest City or Screw City, because we made a lot of screws, big manufacturing hub. And the fun fact about Rockford, Illinois is the rock band Cheap Trick is from Rockford, Illinois. And they have the best lyric of any song ever, which is, Mommy's all right, daddy's all right. They just seem a little weird. Resonates now that I have kids.
Right, and Deanna, are
Or
you
to
on the line?
Deanna, I think
Yes,
is the
thank you.
last person.
Deanna, are you with us? I think not. So everybody else is gone, right? Wonderful. Natasha, if you'd take it back to the screen. So where are we right now? Well, let's back up. This cohort was actually meant to launch back in June, but that was before COVID began and everybody was kind of thrown for a loop. So when that happened, we moved our deadlines back a little bit, and as you're all very aware, you submitted your applications by mid-June. From May to July, we went through those applications, and at the same time, we were talking with fellows and figuring out who is a good fit for this program and who not. By mid-July, we had selected the cohort, so we had talked with you all. We knew that you had projects, were representative of your community, and that our fellows were on board, ready to do this sort of work. About from July through August 31st, we were working on changing all of our training from a very in-person format. Formerly, we brought all our fellows to one place, quite often Washington, D.C., and did a very intensive 2-day training with them. A big part of that has transitioned to an online format now. And next week is when we kind of begin and end, if you will, the live part of that orientation, where we'll really work together very interactively, much the way we are with you guys, but over the course of 2 afternoons. So right now, our fellows are working on their self-paced part of that orientation. Next Friday, in about 40 minutes from now, next Friday, our fellows will have officially graduated. And on September 28th, the first thing I will do when I get to work in the morning is send out introductions to all of you. So September 28th, at some point, you will have an email introduction to your fellow in your inbox. And from that point forward, you and your communities can work on what we call scoping. And Natasha will talk about our process for actually doing this community science project work together.
Great, thank you, Erin. Sorry about that brief pause. So for those of you that might have forgotten, because all of you have heard this about AGU, AGU is an international association of more than 60,000 advocates and experts in earth and space science. And of those, 53% are international in 137 countries, including the United States. And through our initiatives such as mentoring, professional development, and awards, AGU members uphold and foster an inclusive and diverse scientific community. AGU also hosts numerous scientific conferences, including the largest international Earth and Space Science Conference, as well as serving as the leading publisher of the highest quality journals. We were founded, fundamental to our mission since our founding in 1919 is to live our values, which we do a lot through our net zero energy building in Washington, D.C., currently not right now, but soon in the future. Additionally, we make scientific discoveries and research accessible and engaging to all in order to help protect society and prepare global citizens for the opportunities and challenges ahead. So the Thriving Earth Exchange is a program of AGU that fosters partnership between communities and scientists to advance, local priorities through an approach that we call community science. Our mission at Thriving Earth Exchange is to strengthen and enhance collaboration among communities, scientists, and partner organizations so that all communities can build healthy, resilient, thriving, just, and ecologically responsible futures. Our vision at Thriving Earth Exchange is to be a leader in contributing to global well-being by supporting communities' awareness and application of science, promoting equity by ensuring that all communities benefit from the opportunity to participate in, contribute to, and guide the use of scientific knowledge. So what is community science? Thriving Earth Exchange defines community science as the process by which scientists and communities do science together to advance one or more community priorities. It encourages communities, particularly those that might have been historically marginalized and oppressed, to guide, participate in, learn from, and benefit from the science. Community science is designed to make a tangible local impact. When done well, it can enhance community capacity, advance equity, enrich scientific practices, diversify the sciences, address global challenges, and build public trust and support for the sciences. So in this context, science is understood to be an inclusive suite of activities encompassing research, engagement, education, synthesis, and application, and it's nested in a range of intersecting disciplines and ways of knowing with diverse cultural roots. So just to briefly reiterate, community science has several fundamental core values. Community voices come first. All projects start from community interests, not scientific research agendas, and you all have conveyed that to us already. All communities deserve access to science to advance their priorities. Communities deserve the opportunity to ask the questions about issues that matter most to them and be able to obtain the right type of scientific information and scientists who are willing to work with them and understand their culture, context, and priorities. And then science is a tool to help drive solutions. Science is one tool amongst many to help advance feasible tools and solutions that work well with community knowledge, know-how, and capacity towards substantive community impact. And then finally, short-term immediate impact seeds long-term culture of community science. What community science projects do is they do not aim to be the solution, rather it is oftentimes a stepping stone towards a larger solution and instills an equitable way of community knowledge and science coming together. So just to give you a brief overview, and this is again something that we would have talked about before, but it's really important to reiterate the makeup of a community science project team. Community leaders like yourselves bring your community knowledge, insights, and connections. You represent and speak on behalf of the community. You engage widely within that community and ensure that the project is responsive to community priorities, is relevant in the community, and impactful in that community. The community scientists bring scientific knowledge, insights, and connections. They engage as representatives of the scientific community. They ensure that science is relevant, responsive, and meaningful for community priorities. And then last, but certainly not least, is your community science fellow, who you will be in contact, as Erin mentioned, by September 28th. This is your project manager. They will guide the team through the process, ensure communication and coordination, they will serve as a primary connecting point to Thriving Earth Exchange, network, and our resources. They will recruit the scientists, and projects are generally networked, but usually function very independently of one another. The minimum is of one of each participant. There's always one fellow. We recommend at least 2 communities, and some of you have many more, which is awesome. And then scientists tend to be very variable, between 1 and 5. As staff, our role is to provide structure and support for all of these projects, and that's happening through the Science Policy and Engagement cohort, of which you're all a part of. So to take you briefly through our process, our first phase is scope. All projects start here. In Thriving Earth Exchange, we begin by connecting with communities by having a series of conversations, usually by phone, increasingly by Zoom, and definitely virtual these days, to understand their priorities around climate change, natural hazards, and natural resources issues. So you have done pre-vetting. We do have a basic scope, but what you will do is further conversations with your fellow And that at the end of this step, it will basically culminate in the development of a fully developed project description. So we often connect with communities via many of our partners. Many of you have come to us through various ones of these partners. And scoping is the stage in which you work with, scoping is the stage where you will be working with your community fellow, science fellow, to develop the top priority in your community into an actionable project that also matches well with much of the scientific expertise that we have in our network and beyond. So the second phase, once you have that project description, then you move on to match. And match is all about building that project team. So using that project description, your community science fellow will essentially begin a search for a scientist match. Your role in the, sorry, Priscilla, your role as a community leader is to be patient. This process can take up to where it's a couple of months, depending on the community science fellow's availability. Be as timely as possible in your review and selection of community science recommendations. Your community science fellow will be responsible for sending you those recommendations, and then provide any clarification to the fellow about your preferences as necessary. So there might be certain things that they don't necessarily capture initially, early on, but it is your role to be able to really clarify that. The community science fellow role is to search for appropriate community scientist candidates using our database and beyond our database as well. They will be the ones responsible for interviewing those community scientist candidates, and they will also get references for those potential candidates to ensure the integrity of Earth and space science and to make sure that they are indeed the right types of scientists working with your community. And then they will finally provide those recommendations of community scientist candidates to you. So it's important to note that match will most likely start towards the end of this year, and it will slow down throughout the holidays based on the timeline that we have for the science policy and engagement cohort. Just a picture there of a matching that was done with a project in Africa. So just so you know what to expect. Obviously, you can see what's happening right now, and this is sort of the way it'll work. So looking ahead, and we're not going to really get into a deep dive here yet. The last couple of phases are solve and share. And solve is really all about doing your 6 to 18 month project. So with your fellow and your scientist, you will determine whether it's going to be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or somewhere in between. In this phase, you'll work with your community science fellow and community scientists to develop that project plan and realize the milestones that you will co-create together. Solve will most likely occur by early 2021, given the holidays and everything like that that's in between. And then just to highlight that share, although we originally called it out as a 4th phase, in this new diagram to the left of your screen, share is really about sharing the highlights, milestones, results, and outcomes throughout all phases of your community science project. And your fellow will ensure that you are able to do that through all of these different phases. So a few tips for the savvy community leaders, such that you all are. These are gleaned from some of the over 100 community leaders that we've worked with in the last 6 years. So this sort of gives you a sense of what to sort of think about. First and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions. A prepared and respectful scientist will create an open, inviting space for you to ask questions and raise doubts. So as much as possible, our vetting, our recruiting will ensure that we have these types of scientists who are open to you asking questions. At the same time, also be open to their questions and the community science fellow questions, because there will be times when your fellow or the scientist might not necessarily know your community context and the knowledge as well as you do, and you might be using terms that they're not familiar with. So it does work both ways. Engage in action with reflection. So pause to self-reflect along the way. Always take that moment and create that sort of opportunity with your team to be able to do that self-reflection. And if you have, if is the project meeting everyone's expectations? And if not, have you built in enough flexibility to change course? Then build trust within your community. Many of you are already amazing at doing this, but if you're not already deeply connected, connecting the work of a community science project through community meetings, such as what's pictured here in a project that we did in Barnesville, Ohio, really helped to build transparency and trust with those benefiting from the results of the community science project. And then be accountable to yourself and your team. Scientists and community members may operate with different cultural norms, expectations, and ways of expressing themselves. Make sure you're on the same page and in agreement when you chart out a collaboration's purpose, desired outcomes, and expected involvement, such as timeframes, deadlines, capacity, etc. Set clear, measurable goals for each of the team members from the start of the project, and outline those team roles and responsibilities very carefully. Can't stress it enough. It's really important to know what you, your scientists and your fellow will be doing, and to check in frequently with your teammates to discuss the project made and towards achieving those desired outcomes. Be honest about your capabilities and don't be afraid to ask for help once again. And then base action on evidence. The results from community science projects may not always be what you have anticipated for your community. Be prepared to base any action on the scientific evidence and not necessarily on any political agendas. And that's why you're here, because you're interested in that, right? On to you, Erin. You're muted, I believe.
I try so hard not to do that. Thank you, Natasha. Does anybody have any questions at this point about the process? If you do, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, type it in the chat box. If there's nothing, I will continue. So this cohort is different. As Natasha said, we have worked with, if you can back up, Natasha. We've worked with over 100 different communities. For a long time, they were led by staff. We now have a fellowship program, and typically our cohorts don't receive any funding. Everybody's pro bono. It's very much based on trust and goodwill. This particular cohort is funded by the Betsy and Gordon Moore Foundation. And I've put this text here not to scare you all away. This is exactly what is in the project proposal that we are answering by holding this cohort. And as you can see, there's already a couple strike-throughs. Perhaps one of the positive outcomes of COVID is that rather than 8 communities, we are able to have 17 communities in this cohort because we are no longer bringing everybody to DC, for example. So we're very excited about the change that that's instigated. I just want to highlight this part here. We will create new Thriving Earth Exchange community partners in 17 communities, as well as incorporate science communication and engagement skills building to improve the capacity of communities and community leaders to continue to use science and scientists to self-advocate and develop sustainable and community-led solutions to community challenges. So we really want to stress this is about your community and empowering you to know where to get the science help that you need for whatever questions come up. And as Natasha said, this is a stepping stone. A lot of your projects, we've talked with all of you individually, are very complex. And we're hoping to give you a real solid foothold towards solving some of those very complex problems. So we're here to help you and to empower you and to help you self-advocate. So please tell us how we can help you do that better. If anything comes up along the way, that's what we're here to help enable. If you would click along, Natasha. Again, this is directly from the grant. We want you to be able to understand and talk about the value of science. And please keep in mind, this was written toward kind of a scientific audience. So it is directed at ensuring science has a nice, strong role here. Scientists are equipped with the skills and savvy to work with communities. We know scientists are sometimes not very good at talking with the general public and conveying their science. We are trying through the fellows and the interviews to make sure that we get scientists who kind of get this, that this is about communities, it's about empowering you guys to answer the questions you're interested in answering, not answering a scientific agenda or writing a paper. And one more, go back. This is, again, grant language, but we are developing a set of descriptive materials and collateral that support local leaders. That's to say, if you want to do a press release, we're going to make sure you have the ability to do that, you're not starting from scratch, and that you have the support to make sure that's a good, solid press release, for example. Next, please. So that's kind of why this cohort is different. First of all, it's externally funded. And one of the things we've learned over the years is that it's great to ask people to do things for free, but it doesn't always last very long. This grant that we're working under will have micro grants available to support community project and engagement. And we will talk about that toward early next year when we understand more what you guys would like to do with that funding, what your needs are, but that money is there to support your projects and to ensure that the people in your community who should be engaged can engage. One of the other really fun things about this project is it's not just kind of our Thriving Earth Exchange program within AGU. We have 3 other departments with different specializations. We have public affairs, media relations, and sharing science, who will all be engaged in helping develop those products and support tools for the communities. So again, if you want to do a press release, we can help with that. If you want to talk with policymakers in a specific sort of policy forum, we can help with that and make sure that you're prepared and comfortable doing that. Related, we will have tailored trainings to support your efforts to engage with your broader community, the media and policymakers. These will depend very much on what you want to work on. So if you come to us and say, we would really like to have a community workshop on this topic, can you help us do that? We will do our best to make sure that you have the tools and the expertise and whatever you need to make that community workshop a reality. We also will probably be able to offer access to expertise from other partners. We're forming partnerships beyond the American Geophysical Union. So it's not just Earth and space sciences, but if you need, for example, perhaps more help understanding the power dynamics in your community and how to work in the policy context of your community, we, for example, have a budding relationship with the American Political Science Association, amongst others. So ultimately, our goal for this cohort is to support scientists and communities to continue to do science community partnerships well beyond what we start here and increase awareness and support of science and its role in the well-being of communities. Next, please. Would really like you to stay connected. That's super important, as Natasha has highlighted. You need to stay connected with your fellows. Your fellows will be scheduling monthly check-ins with your team, as well as setting up bi-weekly touch bases with you as necessary. If it's too much, if it's too little, talk to your fellows. It's all about making sure the project works, so you just need to communicate with them about what works the best. As well as when you have a community scientist on board. Once that scientist's on board, you will be most consistently in contact with those key members of your community science team, because you will be actively trying to resolve your priority. And with us, that's a question we have for you. We meet every month with the fellows in every single cohort. We mentor individual fellows separately from those monthly calls. So we are in constant contact with the fellows, helping them troubleshoot, helping them think through different challenges, sharing connections with scientists. And they have a fellowship, and we want to know if you're interested in the same thing. If you, having briefly met each other on this call, are interested in learning what other community leaders are doing. We do have a lot of overlap, both within this cohort and with other cohorts, on issues that are very similar. So our question to you is, would like to develop similar meetings for community leaders, like the ones we have with our fellows? And the question is, are you interested? And if you are, how would you like that to happen? With the fellows, we'd kind of do a check-in. How's everything going? Does anybody want to bring up something for group discussion? We also talk about common themes, and we can do whatever would support you guys. So I think with that, we would like to open it up for Q&A and your answers to our questions and our answers to your questions. So please feel free to unmute yourself and let us know what you have.
And just a note, Erin, there have been a few questions in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone has had a chance to see those and see the answers. Jenny, you had some great questions. So maybe you want to ask them, and then we're happy to sort of fill in with the response. Just for those, I don't know, Deanna, if you can hear us or see the chat, hopefully you can. I think you might.
She says she can hear us. So.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you. Yes, I think my first question was just regarding the solving phase where you'd said it can take 6 to 18 months. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like a set in stone once our fellow says this should take 7 months, 7 months.
No, if the projects, once they begin, it's really a relationship between the community leaders, the fellows, and the scientists. I think we've got projects that have continued past 18 months. We have projects that just kind of got what they needed to do done. And they're like, okay, we're on to other things. So it's really, it's very variable. There's no set in stone. We are not watching a clock. We've got projects moving on to second phases now. So it's kind of depends on you.
Okay, thank you. And I think my other one was, I know my PIO would want me to ask, so made sure I asked if there was any specific language we had to have in any press releases or any kind of advertisements, which I know we'll get to later once we have a fellow and a scientist, but just wanted to make sure.
I think we will have that. Well, we're preparing press release templates, and we will have boilerplate language for what your involvement with Thriving Earth Exchange is. I think apart from that, I'd say no right now, but let us get that template ready for you. Yeah. And we also have the support of the media relations, for example. If it's a press release that should go out beyond your immediate community, they will help us make sure that that happens.
So with that, we'll just open it up to any other questions. I'm sure all of you are anchoring to ask something.
Because it seems like the timelines are pretty variable and flexible, is there any like culmination event or, you know, goal that we're all working towards?
Within your project, yes. And you will decide on that as a team.
Yeah, we're more like this like cohort of people or anything like that.
Okay. No, all projects are going to move at a different pace. So that's a really hard thing. Again, we would like, if you're interested, to have calls like this maybe once every 2 months or some other way for you guys to be able to talk with each other and see how your projects are going, if that is helpful to you. We definitely don't want to take any more of your time than we are right now. But if that is helpful, we're happy to facilitate that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Nicole. I think if other leaders on this call are interested in something like that, that is definitely something that we would love to explore with you, because it is something that we've sort of bounced around as a team for some years, is seeing if we can somehow showcase the amazing work that scientists and communities are doing together. Rebecca, you think that?
It's Joseph. So yeah, I would like to have a standing monthly meeting that we can all get together and share our projects and where the synergies are. I mean, that'd be great. I do have some other questions though too. So I've identified other scientists that are interested in our projects. How do we bring them in? Do we bring them in when the fellow is assigned to us, or I mean, is there a special process on that?
I'll let you take that one, Natasha.
Sorry, Joseph. thought Aaron was going to take it. Can you please repeat
I was
that?
trying to share the mic.
So we've identified scientists, professors that are interested
Mm-hmm.
in collaborating on our project. So do we bring them in after we have been introduced to the fellow, or, I mean, how's that process work?
You can definitely suggest, Joseph, scientists that you have a good relationship with, that you'd like to work with. And, you know, in several cases, we've had community leaders say that they'd like to work with certain folks, and that, you know, this connection with Thriving Earth Exchange would just enable them to be able to get their services in this way, you know, pro bono. So definitely feel free to let your fellow know about some of the relationships you have and that you've built. I think that's really important, and maybe you'd like to sort of inform that fellow on how you'd like to expand upon those relationships.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Another question that I have is, when applying for state and federal grants, can we use the Earth Exchange AG program as part of the in-kind funding? Because, you know, you're actually helping with the fellowship and a lot of in-kind aspect, and a lot of federal grants require that 25% match or 50% match of in-kind.
I'll toss that one to Raj, if you don't mind, Raj.
Not at all. I would say absolutely. And we can even go through an exercise to kind of quantify that for you, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that would be helpful to be able to quantify the dollar amount, so we know how much additional we would have to raise to that in-kind match would be perfect. So
great idea. You're the first person to ask that, actually. So cool thought.
Yeah, definitely.
We apply for a lot of grants.
Somewhat related, I anticipate that as we acquire some data that can inform a proposal for funding, we can also use that information to tap into whatever plans our local state legislators have in developing their piece, whatever they're going to introduce legislatively. And I'm curious as to what the American Political Science Association is willing to do with you, to work with us as part of this cohort, to have some influence. For us, it goes beyond our city. We often have to seek the strength of and support of our assembly people and our senators at the state level, but it's beyond our jurisdiction. So working with that level of government is of interest to me, and I will have my ears open for whatever results from this project to help toward that. So what will the American Political Science Association partnership with AGU and Thriving Earth Exchange have for this cohort?
So our partnership is still pretty new. We're testing it on a couple of projects, and you guys will be our next case studies. I think they're very open to whatever is needed. I have a political scientist working on a project that I'm kind of acting as the fellow on, and she's helping the community with op-eds, with just understanding who's who in the government, writing newspaper articles. I think it's, so far our relationship is very much helping the community understand the power dynamics and what your options are to influence those.
And you just reminded me of some of the key words that I saw in your proposals, and that's and I took note of that so that I do keep it in mind.
Oh, good.
That there is an orientation that this project and therefore the cohort will be having, and that's that community engagement. It's a community engagement and development project that we're all embarking on. The specifics to be scoped. At the gist of that is the community's voice, community participation. And related to that is how we go about communicating. So communication, what about communication, how to communicate, and in those communication pieces, including science-based information.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as I Yeah, and as I said, we're going to be working with media relations within AGU. They're also already busy developing a number of things to just help with the initial communications about the fact that you guys are starting these projects. And then there'll be some guidance, also kind of webinars like this about who do you communicate with when, what's the best vehicle for doing that sort of communication, you know, how do you communicate a message, to what end are you communicating? So we will have that kind of unrolling as the projects get going to really help make sure that that share happens throughout the entire process. And that wheel that Natasha shared at the end is very representative of that. We are actually changing our kind of main, it's not exactly our logo, but one of our key pieces of media of how we communicate our process is we are switching that from a 4-phase to a wheel where that sharing happens throughout, because it's so important to bring people along on this journey. You don't just get to the end of the project and then say, hey, look what I did over here. You really want to make sure there's buy-in from the very beginning.
Thank you. And if I just may add one more thing. So I'm trying to get it through my head, although we are eager and excited about taking action and doing some activities to help with a problem that we think exists, in this case in Pinole, we will carry that out. However, the results of that is what informs the communication pieces that eventually will be disseminated in different ways. Do I have that? Does that match what we're trying to do here?
I think, yes, the communications piece starts with, this is what we're doing, community. Let's everybody get on board and do this together. And then you will have the results of the science showing, look, it's really a problem. And maybe even look at what we've been able to accomplish by doing such and such different action. And we can show that in real numbers, real data. And the communication part is not only getting people to know, but to get them to be excited and understand how they can be part of that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Erin, would you mind if I just add it, in addition, kind of thinking about, Norma, your question and the piece about kind of digging in more broadly to policymakers who are outside of your jurisdiction. In addition to the partnership with ABSA and Media Relations, AGU's public affairs team will also be involved, and they're extremely plugged into the Hill. And I think that they'll also be a really good resource on a case-by-case, project-by-project basis from start to finish, even before results, just to kind of help with those activation items.
Thank you. So if no one else is speaking, I just want to, again, translate and absorb it, because as I think a different way of seeing this, as again, as eager and excited as the Pinole team is, we want more people to be as excited. That's kind of, okay, the thrust of it. Got it. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, this cohort is science, policy, and engagement. And that engagement part is so important. I mean, you can do your little science project off in your own little corner, but you're not going to have impact. And we really want, whenever we embark on a Thriving Earth Community Science project, for there to be impact. For you to feel that you've accomplished something in that 6 to 18 month period. If you do go on to another phase, you again kind of set milestones, and there needs to be that feeling and that evidence of impact. And a big part of that is engagement. Yeah. So Deanna was asking if the fellows, if everything is virtual, or if the fellows will come visit. And at this point, I cannot answer that question. We will see with COVID. Going forward, at least over the next 6 to 9 months at least, I fully anticipate everything will be online. That's actually not a change from how Thriving Earth Exchange has run in the past. Very, very often we have fellows in a completely different state, we have scientists in another state, and we have the communities in a third state, or even in another country. So Thriving Earth is kind of already COVID native in a lot of ways. And I would mention, you all are COVID native. You began your projects, you applied for the projects within the context of COVID, but I just encourage you to all keep in mind that that will continue to be a presence in our lives. And to whatever extent the projects can embrace that, can maybe have some element, especially for those of you looking at health anyway, let's make that part of it. We do work in what we call geohealth within AGU, so it doesn't need to be something in addition to the COVID crisis. It can be something that complements work that's already going on in your community.
I'm curious about kind of the fellows and the scientists. What kind of training are the fellows receiving? And for like the scientists and the fellows as well, it's all pro bono, as you said. So what's kind of the motivation for them to want to work with us?
I'll start, and then I would invite the rest of the Thriving Earth Exchange team to join in on this. There's a movement, I think, in science where people do science because that's what they really are interested in. That's the career they've chosen, but they also feel that science needs to do something. And I think there's more and more people, and the fellows themselves, in this case, tend to be just past graduate school for the most part. I'd say the bulk of them. We have fellows who have no science background. They're just kind of friends of science. We have fellows who are retired. So there's a full range. These are people who just want science to play a role in society very actively. So I think that's part of the motivation. I might be speaking very much from my own personal bias, but I don't know if anybody else.
Not at all. I would second that, Erin. I mean, there's definitely it's a growing movement, and it's been really exciting to see. You know, being with the team for 6 years from where we started to where we are now, where we're able to recruit fellows and recruiting fellows, and Melissa can speak very well to this, hasn't been entirely difficult at all. But Melissa, you might want to add more on that.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly on that and say we had 45 fellows apply for this cohort, and we originally had 8 spots. So there's a lot of demand, especially from some of the younger career scientists, for this sort of opportunity.
Yeah, I think Natasha and Erin have done a great job of capturing that motivation, really having an impact, facilitating an impact. As far as the training that the fellows received, Erin has mentioned that they're going to get that 2-day live orientation next week, and they're already currently engaging in a self-paced on-demand series. The training that they receive, so Natasha shared our 4-step process. The fellows receive training deep into that process, all of the nuances behind scope, match, solve, and share. What we have right now, spaces where they can work with you to innovate and customize that process. So they have over 100-page manual with templates and guides and things that they'll be sharing with you throughout the lifetime of the project. And in addition to process training, they also get training in skills to facilitate collaboration between a community leader and a scientist in doing a project with that process. So they get training in facilitation, project management, conflict resolution and troubleshooting, a variety of things, skills that might be deployed in that context.
Any other questions? Yes, Norma.
Have the dates to meet our fellows been sent out to the contact folks at the different projects?
No, you will receive an email, not next Monday, but the Monday after, introducing the 2 of you. And from that point forward, we step back a little bit, and you and the fellow arrange a date to meet.
Okay, thank you.
Nicole, I thought maybe you were also asking about the training or the preparation for scientists that would be part of the project as well, not just the fellows. Was that right?
Asking about the fellows, but sure, the scientists too.
Maybe, so the probably the most significant thing about the scientist is your fellow will help you write a job description for the scientists, and that will specify the kinds of characteristics you're looking for. And that can be things like cultural competency, the ability to work in teams, the ability to speak English as opposed to jargon, the ability to speak Spanish. It can be all of those kinds of things. And then the fellow will actually interview scientists and come to you with recommendations based on the criteria that you guys have established, that you both have established together. And you'll have final approval over whether that's a scientist you want to work with.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no,
Oh,
Joseph, I was just gonna.
I have two more questions. So are the scientists paid? Are they part? Is there a stipend for them at all?
There is not. It's all pro bono work. We do that for a couple reasons. The biggest reason is we don't have a very big budget. The other reason is we're looking for scientists who are genuinely interested in using their science towards a community priority. And what we found is that sometimes that community priority, the use of science for a community priority, may not align with a research agenda or may not align with an institutional priority. And so to relieve that possibility of conflict, we ask them to do it pro bono. And then finally, the third reason it's pro bono is we really emphasize parity of decision making. The fact that the scientists and the community leaders are working together as partners. And it's hard to have parity when one person has a big budget and another person doesn't. And many of our community leaders don't have large budgets. So especially when we're working with volunteer community leaders, we want that parity of decision process. So the other thing this might be more information than you want, so totally sorry if it is. At the same time, we're doing what we can to gently and maybe not so gently push at the culture of academia and of research so that this kind of community engaged work starts to become a valued part of a scientific career rather than this something that they do pro bono.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.
The second question I have is the CDC is talking about, not having a vaccine until the second or third quarter next year. So COVID is going to be around for us for a while. So the community engagements and the remote community engagement, through possibly over Zoom, and then the outreach through social media. What can this program help this cohort with? Like with maybe a paid Zoom account so we can have these engagements, because the free account is only 45 minutes and community engagements can run much longer than that. And then also maybe a way to figure out how we can engage with social media a little bit more on these types of programs. Because I think it's an opportunity, actually. By being in COVID, it forces us to figure out different ways of communicating or getting the word out that we typically would have done by a door-by-door knocking or some other form. So, I think it's actually a positive to make our programs go much faster and bigger than what we anticipated. But how can we engage your team and our team to help move that along faster?
Kelly, do you want to tackle that? So I should introduce the rest of the team. So as most of you know, Natasha is the community liaison. She's also responsible for the international part of our program. Kelly is our education and communications coordinator. And Melissa really helps keep us all organized, bring the fellows on board with the scientists. She's the main logistics wizard on the team. And Raj is our director, you might have gathered. So Kelly, if you want to tackle that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So First, we do have a paid Zoom account that the fellows will have access to and can use with you anytime that you're planning an outreach event via Zoom. So that's definitely something we can support. In terms of social media and other virtual engagement, we have like AGU's main accounts on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, et cetera, are available for folks to post as guests on, if that would be helpful, or kind of case by case if something like a community Twitter chat would be useful to achieve your goals, like we could facilitate that and utilize AGU's following. What we're doing right now is kind of on a like project by project. Our media relations team can sit down with you and your fellow and talk about what would be helpful if it's not in kind of the template toolbox that your fellow has available when y'all start. But as kind of an example, coming up, a project that's going on in Cambridge are working with us to develop like infographic chunks that they're going to use and put out through Twitter to tell, they're working on urban heat island effect actually, but to kind of share with neighboring communities in a different way. So we have kind of person power that we can sit down and work with you on. We have a design team that we can utilize, and we have different channels that we can work with you on social media to get the word out about stuff.
So it wasn't so much that you have per se a solution today, but how can we start to develop best practices that not only us as a cohort will work on, but AGU can have to build up from there. And some of the ideas that are just floating through my head are like on a Facebook, there's ways to do targeted geographic marketing, right, by zip code. And some of us are targeting within a certain geographic, because we don't want to broadcast to the world, but we want to be able to bring in that community and engage and hug that community remotely. And so those types of ideas that it's not so much we come up with a solution today, but how do we start to build that best practices tool case for this type of operation?
Can I jump in here a second, Erin?
Absolutely.
So Joseph, that is awesome. One of our goals with this cohort is to do some co-learning together to kind of figure those sorts of things out. And then one of our commitments is to take that back to the whole program so that it becomes available to all of the communities that we want to work with now and in the future. So that spirit of let's figure this out together that's one of the things I think we would love to invite into that. So if you have ideas, if you have suggestions, they don't have to be fully thought out. We can figure it out and try it out and see what works and what doesn't.
I'm going to add on one thought, share that component of our process that you heard about. It's not just sharing within the community and broadly externally, it's also sharing within the program itself. So we really want to network solutions and approaches between projects so that you can all build on one another's work. That's a huge component of our process.
I have a question that's kind of the flip side of what Joseph is talking about, and it's difficult, and maybe we're not going to answer it right now, but how, especially these days when everything is virtual, how are we going to engage with communities that don't have access to that technology and that ability to hop on Zoom? Is that going to be a component of this process? Or do you guys have ideas and tools for that?
So I think, oh, go ahead, Raj.
Nope.
This is kind of related to Joseph seeding this idea sharing among projects right now. Thank you for starting that conversation. In terms of bridging the digital divide in this world where everything's virtual, we do have some projects that are active right now that are working and testing out strategies to reach their community members who don't have access to broadband. So we can make sure, I think it sounds like what's going to be helpful is having some kind of sharing platform among everyone where we can plop these ideas in. But one example is a community's taking advantage of food distribution centers and providing rentable hotspots in some cases, but mostly just using kind of existing infrastructure in place that where there are touch points with community members and getting their communications and engagement opportunities out via those other partners in their local regions. But I think idea sharing there would be really useful.
And just to say, again, there will be microgrants available to this cohort, and that might be one of the things you want to use that microgrant toward. And we'll send you all a follow-up email after this call with a survey link. It's a very short survey. It's only 4 or 5 questions, but one of those questions is, based on what you know at this point, how would you use that money? Because we are learning with you how to do this. As I said, this is the first cohort of several years of doing this where we've had support of that type. So if you could mention that there, Nicole, that would be really helpful.
And that's a guess, right? We're not going to hold you to that. That's
No.
just what you think you might want to use the money for, so we can get a sense. You can change your mind and evolve.
The survey's anonymous, so you could tell us whatever you want. Sorry, Deanna has a question through email. She wants to know about age appropriateness and would it make sense to arrange working with the local high school or junior high, obviously. So she's in Paxico, Kansas, very small community of 221 people, if I remember correctly. They have exceptional leeway with student participation and developing STEM skills. If you guys want to work with students, we are absolutely open to that. I think you just need to make sure parents are okay with things. I think in the case of Norma, for example, that might be something you want to explore further, and I think you are going to do that with, I forget her name, your third community leader. Itzel. Yes, thank you, Lisa. To work with cleaning up the stream with students and build awareness through the students. So, yes, there's a lot of flexibility in these projects. We have the process, and as you guys have seen, the process is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. And there's a lot of flexibility in there to design projects that fit your community. So if you have questions or ideas like that, by all means, bring them to your fellows, bring them to us. We definitely want to explore how to make the projects impactful.
And it's likely that there might be projects that have done something similar or explored similar opportunities. So if you want to engage with K-12, we could connect you with the communities who have done that and had success to brainstorm a little bit further.
Okay, and Deanna is also asking me to define the mini grant size. I cannot do that right now. It will be in the couple thousand range, depending on community need. So we'll just ask you, what are you going to use it for? And then try and arrange things amongst the 17 different projects to make sure everybody can achieve their goals. Are there any further questions?
In astronomy, they often talk about getting within a factor of 10 as being good enough. So to give you that parameter for mini grants, between 1,000 and 10,000.
If there's no further questions, I'd like to just quickly revisit my question to you all. And again, we're going to ask this again in the survey. You can send us emails. Just your gut feeling right now, and Joseph, you've said monthly standing calls. Does anybody else have thoughts about how you'd like to kind of be in communication as a cohort? We operate a Slack channel. I don't know if everybody is familiar with Slack. I think email is always the default. Certainly Zoom is something most of us can do. What would get you excited about participating regularly?
I will just kind of jump in. I think my colleague would be amicable to. I would be happy to. I'm really excited to work with this cohort and learn, just sort of with the caveat of maybe not being able to make anyone just because of the COVID response on our end. And I'm assuming a lot of folks are kind of in that same boat.
I think we would be there. And if, 10 people show up, great. If 5 people, great. If 35 of you, awesome. But it would definitely not be a requirement. It would be something that we would offer to, like drop in.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I appreciate the drop-in idea. A consistent date and time to plan out is helpful. I'm eager and excited about this project. I also have a little reservation because I personally have about 4 different email addresses that I have to attend to, and so the thought of yet another set of emails is a little overwhelming right now. On the other hand, if there can be the opportunity to drop in, yes, and also the equivalent of what I've known in the past as a listserv, which is active. One can go back and refer to question and answers, kind of like this chat. I might go, if it becomes available, I might want to go back and see what was the question, what was the response on my time, even if it's 2 a.m. in the morning, which sometimes I honestly can be. That's when I can be available. I just know already that when I am involved in the project, I like to be really quite involved, but I also know that we have to shine and not burn ourselves out. So, I don't want to be flippant, but I did wonder whether Thriving Earth Exchange, in considering the scientists, also somewhat screened for a sense of humor, along with. Okay.
I want to answer that. So that is a really common thing. What we found out though is if you ask people if they have a sense of humor, they always say yes. So we've got to come up with a clever way to screen for that.
Right, I appreciate that. No, I just think about, I think we are engaged, as you can tell. We are interested. We are excited about this. I think, at least for me, there's also part of me that looks at how complex things are and how, we're like this into, we have projects that are this into trying to do good in the world, I believe. And presumably it will expand. But it can also just be so big that it sometimes quashes my enthusiasm personally, especially when I see things like no sunshine on any given weekday, as we saw recently in the Bay Area. So I have to have some way of having, if not built-in, created, and I'm hopeful co-created sense of levity amongst us, because we are addressing serious matters, hopefully in an engaging and fun way. That's what will keep me involved for certain. Thank you.
When it comes time to scope your project with your fellow, make sure you flag that to them as something you're really looking for in a scientific partner. They'll look for it.
I might go out on a limb here, but I'd say, again, our process is not rocket science, it's pretty basic. The fellow exists to help kind of move things along, but also to prevent that burnout, Norma. They're there to help make the project move along, hopefully smoothly. I'd say you can be as involved in that as you want, and I would even encourage you to get involved in that search for a scientist to whatever extent you're comfortable with, because we want you to be able or to feel comfortable looking for a scientist on your own later. So talk with your fellow, and if you want to be very involved with that, I think that's something you and the fellow can work out together. Communicate.
Exactly. No, I understand. It's also, I am, trusting that among the folks here, there is a certain degree of understanding that, what ends up happening, I think, is that interested, busy, civic-minded people surround themselves by interested, busy, civic-minded people. And we feed off of our sense of commitment. And I think that's great. And that feeds my soul for certain. And I just have to remind myself as well to manage my time. And the reality is that I try, and occasionally it's like, I can't make all the meetings. Yeah.
And I think a lot of the scientists who want to do this sort of work, kind of, if they want to do this sort of work, they're kind of pre-screened.
Also, just building on some of those answers, you know, eventually what Thriving Earth would like to do is to put ourselves out of jobs. We want to be able to like have community leaders like yourselves be able to access and use the science as necessary for your community, build those relationships. And so as much as possible, if you're interested in really learning, you know, the ins and outs of this, work really closely with those fellows and get them and ask a lot of questions, you know, as I mentioned earlier, like it's really key. And, you know, don't worry about our jobs, we'll find something else. Joking, of course, team. But at the same time, not joking. Any other questions? Any other concerns about the process? Talking to your fellows, your scientists?
I have a question that came up from a discussion I was having with Raj the other day. And this is very experimental. This time we asked the fellows which communities they felt they wanted to work with, which was based purely on the issue and the geography. For example, Heat Islands, California. To what extent would you have liked to have that choice? And what would be important information for you to know about fellows and kind of saying, I think this person is somebody I would like to have help manage the project?
Well, I'm just going to say I trust your process, and I think it's probably okay that you make this first step. It seems like we have a lot of flexibility as we move along, and you know, both working on the scope together and choosing the science. So I'm okay with that. I mean, we also have our little team in Pinole. We're going to be working together. You know, we have 4 main people and we know each other, but we haven't worked on a project like this. So anyway, I'm just seeing sort of we'll internally be getting to know each other, and I'm very excited about it, but it's new, even in our community, it's a new partnership. So I feel pretty positive about the fellow, you know, you selecting the fellow choosing us based on the issue and the geography. That seems fair to me.
And I think the fellow enthusiasm at least matches your enthusiasm. So they're very excited to get started.
And I would agree. I like this process because it models it for us the first time around. The second time around, then once it's been modeled at least once, then we could take that idea or that concept and then duplicate it ourselves. So.
And to hear that that the fellows have project management and conflict something or other, conflict management training, that's helpful.
I think it's kind of neat that we got chosen, that somebody out there wanted us.
Cool. And I have to say, if there are any problems, if you're just not feeling the vibe, come to us. That's specifically what Natasha is here for. Is if you guys have any issues with anything in the project, the process, the scientists, the fellows, let us know. Thank you,
Perfect
Natasha.
Perfect segue, Erin. There you go.
And again, we'll send this all in a follow-up email. I'm managing the cohort overall, but I am absolutely also here if you have any concerns or questions.
Yes.
Raj, Kelly, and Melissa will be joining. We work very closely as a team. We're all here to make sure these projects work.